Alrighty, welcome back. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Many of you may have found us for the first time. Our show is Crossing the World. We're here every night for 4 hours, and the whole raison d'etre is to let folks know it's okay to be a Christian. It's okay to be excited about Jesus Christ. It's okay to talk about things relative to the end times and know that we're in them and that they are soon, that we serve a risen Savior, and look up, for thy redemption is nigh. Jesus is coming back very quickly, and the signs are all around. Now, is he coming back the 21st of May? No man knows the time or the hour. That's ridiculous. But Jesus says we'll know the season. And are we in the season? You bet. You bet we're in the season. So, that's what we do. The Lord has put on my heart over a year ago that we are headed into a time of economic collapse, and that is a prophecy. I believe that the Lord has spoken to me, and in turn, I'm telling you, an economic collapse is imminent. We need to fast. We need to pray. We need to get to know the Lord better. We need to build our relationship with the Lord. We need to know what our calling is, what is our gifting, and then come into relation with other believers. I encourage you to grow gardens. I encourage you, if the Lord is leading you onto a piece of land, get onto a piece of land. Couponing. But do whatever you can do to prepare yourself for what's coming, because it is, and it's soon. Is it tomorrow? Probably not, but is it within the next 18 months? I believe so. I absolutely believe so. And so, alrighty, if all has gone well, I believe this is Stan. Good evening, you're on Crossing the World. Is this Stan?
It's Stan and Holly. You there, Holly? Hello?
Hello, Holly.
I'm here.
Hey, guys.
Hello, hello.
Well, welcome, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Vincent.
It is, Holly, it is a real pleasure to get to speak to you. I've been hoping that I might get a chance to spend a little bit of time with you, so when Stan said that you may be able to join us tonight, I was really thrilled, so welcome.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Now, Holly, I was just speaking about some things that I don't know if they're near and dear to your heart per se, but I think we're very much in one accord. For the last several months, I have been noticing and talking about how different areas of the world have been getting hammered. It's almost as if the Lord has a laser beam, and he's going to make sure that the prophecies in Revelation come true as far as famine, and even as far as the cost of a loaf of bread ending up being a day's wages. Yesterday, you put it all together on your blog and reported area by area around the world that is getting hammered on by different weather events. This isn't just stories in the news. This is going to become real for George and Sally in America pretty quick, isn't it?
It is, and in fact, there are many farmers already being impacted to the point where their storage bins for their grain, their farms, their soil, the crops, their tractors, their barns, their sheds, all of the equipment swept away. It's not just the actual food crop and the heartbreak of losing their home and everything else they had. Their entire livelihood is being washed away. And this, I don't know how many of these people have insurance. Some folks that are in flood areas have had to let their insurance lapse simply because they couldn't afford to keep it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you look at what's happening along the Mississippi River, and it's heartbreaking. I mean, it is literally heartbreaking where you see all of these folks and their livelihood literally washed away.
There have been darn few of those people that have not stated publicly that their faith in the Lord has sustained them.
Yeah.
And that is about the only thing that has.
Well, and you look around the world. You look at Australia and the droughts in central and western Australia that have wiped out wheat crops there. the wildfires in Russia last year, and some early reports seem to be that it looks like they're preparing for more wildfires in the exact same area this year. You look at the droughts in Texas, come on now, Vince, Oklahoma, in Kansas. Saw a report a couple of days now, the same report, where Texas cattlemen, they can't feed their cattle. There's no grazing. There's nothing for them to graze on, and they're having to sell their herds off. Otherwise, they're going to starve, which we already have. That's the correct. lowest amount of beef per capita in America since the 50s, I believe, and it's about to get even worse. I'm sorry, Holly, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, you were absolutely on target there, Vincent. You know, one thing just in researching this that I read just before going on your program here is that Kansas, Texas, and Oklahoma, they produce almost a third of the entire U.S. wheat supply. And where is the worst drought?
Yep.
Those three states.
Yeah.
So, in looking at some material here for your show, just for being a stat nut, I try and keep track of what our global and what our U.S. grain reserves are. And I look at that probably once or twice a year. And for the world reserves, they kind of hover somewhere between 75 and 85 for their supplies. When you look at the U.S., we were neck and neck in 2008/9. They do it in double years there. And then the 2009 year and 10, we were all in parity, just within, a few a few days worth of supplies. But in 2010, things changed radically for the worst. The world still has 75 days supply. They were doing well, even with all those Russian fires. We still had a global supply at 75 days. But where did we go? We dropped almost 30 days off of that. We went down to 53 days. This year, worse. We're at 48 days, and the world's still hanging in there at 75. Now, keep in mind, this is not even factoring in all these extra droughts and the floods. Mm-hmm. They said they may have to cut the expectations by another 5%. This is getting really scary. And we tried to order some extra hard red wheat today. Out. Gone.
Yeah.
Back ordered indefinitely.
And
that's what makes our bread, that hard red wheat.
Exactly. And that's exactly the wheat that's grown in Kansas, in Oklahoma, and in Texas that we're not going to be able to get.
Right.
We're not going to be able to get. And, God kind of knows what he's talking about. And like I said, in the book of Revelation, where it says that, a day's wages for a loaf of bread are the equivalent as far as wheat. It's coming soon. And I don't know, Holly, do you find that outside of the circle of influence that you guys have, when you talk to other people, it's as if you're talking to a rock and they just don't get it?
I don't even know if it's so much that they don't get it. They don't want to get it.
Mm-hmm.
We had breakfast with some friends, and they're neighbors, but they're also friends. And they brought up preparedness. They know what Stan and I do. And they brought it up. And I'm thinking if it had been a touchy topic, they probably would have, talked about their boat or, travel or whatever.
Sure.
But they brought this up and asked some rather pointed questions, and they didn't like the answers too much. And the woman, dear friend that she is, she says, look, they're going to have to shoot me. I'm just not going to deal with it. We tried to look at our 401ks and our investments, and she says, Tommy and I wasted a whole year under stress. So we're just not going to deal with it.
I think they call it cognitive dissonance, isn't it? Where people just don't want to see what's right in front of them. They just choose to look away. And, there's going to be a lot of folks. I've heard it said, Holly, and I couldn't find the statistic online anywhere. I'd have had other people quote it to me. And in essence, it goes something like this. in the event of some sort of civil unrest in America, the government anticipates anywhere between 60 and 90% of the population dying. Have you ever seen or heard anything like that, or is that just an urban legend that somebody goosed me with?
Well, it may not be an urban legend, but I haven't seen it.
Okay. Because I have
heard people say that, if it comes down to that kind of civil unrest, that might be what those rumored FEMA camps will be for,
Mm-hmm.
to house the people that, absolutely lose it.
Now,
I don't know if those things really are for that purpose or if it's for, other purposes or maybe multi-purposes. But I've certainly seen a lot of information on the Internet about it.
Now, one of the things I really appreciate about you guys is you're not commercial, but you have done a really excellent work in I'll call it your survival manual. And I know that you've been going through them as fast as you can print them. Talk a little bit about your book, Holly, and its availability and how people can get it.
Well, also, in addition to that, we have an entire website that is dedicated to all prep. And if you go to our website, standeyo.com, and click on the orange tab in the very upper left part, it will say Free Prep Info. And there's hours and hours and hours of reading material you can download. It costs you absolutely nothing other than your time. When you want to have the most up-to-date and most complete material, and also things that aren't covered on the website, Dare to Prepare is the size of a phone book. It weighs 4 pounds, and it's 632 pages on an 8.5 by 11 format. And we, in laying it out, crammed as much material in there by using when I say small, it's really readable, but we've seen some people make really large books, but they use really, really big print, like for the seeing eye or the blind, and, margins that are about 2 inches wide. And you will see in the book that every inch is used in the entire book. And they've told us, don't put anything else in there. We can't bind it any thicker than this. So right now, the most important part to my heart in there is something that has really, really made me angry when I was researching it. I found out some material that is not widely known that is hurting the American public, all of us, and not just Americans, but worldwide. It is impacting everybody for the sake of making billions of dollars for mega pharma. And I found this material quite by accident, and I can't take credit for discovering by any stretch, but I heard a woman on one of the YouTube videos who was a nurse. Her name is Patriot Nurse on there.
Mm-hmm.
And she happened to mention, just in passing, a SLEP program, SLEP, which stands for Shelf Life Extension Program. And in 1979, prior to that, our medications didn't have an expiration date on the package. But the FDA instituted it in that year as a way to control, the goodness of a product, so they could have a reference point for starting their tests.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't mean that product necessarily, quote, died at the end of that shelf life. Well, what happened was in 1985, the military had a couple $1 million worth of biological, chemical, and nuclear medications that were about ready to expire. And all told, throughout the military, they had over $1 billion worth of medications. Well, they approached the pharmacies to see if they would, be amenable to giving them a cost break. And, of course, they said, forget that. That's not going to happen. So they went to the FDA to see if they could approach it from another viewpoint. And what they asked the FDA to do was start testing to see if medications, not just ones that you have to have a prescription for, but all of your over-counter drugs as well, to see if the expiration date that was logged on to the packages was really a true statement. And lo and behold, guess what? Not even close. Now, last year in 2010, just in America and just for prescription drugs, we spent over $350 billion. $350 billion. That does not count your Tylenol, your Mylanta, your Exlex, all of these things that are just over-the-counter drugs. Factor in that, and that number absolutely makes your head swirl. Well, most of those products are going to have about a 2-year shelf life, and it's lies. It just lies. It is much longer, yes. Anyway, they don't want the public, Big Pharma does not want the public to know about this. And so in this secret program, when I say it's secret, anybody that does not have a .gov or a .mil email affixed to their email address, you're not going to get into that website. And if you do get into it, with those provisos, you have to sign an MOA, which is a memorandum of agreement. In other words, saying that you're not going to say a word about this, of what you see or read. And there is a medical company, a journal, that did publish some of these, and I managed to get my hands on about half of them. There's about 111 that I've published in the book and put down in the book what the medication is, what form it takes, whether it's, say, liquid or tablet, and then what they print, the manufacturer prints on the box, what is their stated shelf life versus what the real life is. And hopefully people won't be tossing perfectly usable drugs into the trash can and wasting all kinds of money. Because, Vince, this is what they're doing, is that they are just annihilating people's pocketbooks for the sake of lining their own. That's as plain as I can say it.
Well, it's the old built-in, I forget the word, but where things aren't good anymore. They make things junky so that they wear out. Well, they don't make junky pharmacy, but if they put it's no good anymore, people freak out and throw it away. And, and particularly if things go bad and you had different medications that you need, or if you had antibiotics that you could use when there weren't any doctors or hospitals open right now, those sorts of things could be invaluable to people during really tough and bad times, which I think are just around the corner. So I had no idea that was going on, Holly, so thank you. And, all of these things, it's so frustrating, and we can lament till, next Wednesday. But the mainstream media never picks up on these stories because, of course, they're dependent on Big Pharma for their advertising dollars, so they don't dare bring these stories to light. So, again, it's a huge service that you've done in finding all this information out, so thank you.
Well, I can't take credit for it. I just happened to stumble onto it. But the thing that just absolutely really gripes me is that, there are so many people out there that have lost their homes, they've lost their jobs, people on fixed incomes, they're seeing their 401ks evaporate. Now they've smashed through the debt ceiling, and they're going to start borrowing from other funds, and heaven only knows where they're going to take that money from. It is all at the expense of people. And I don't know if you saw this article the other day. BP now has reneged on paying all those poor folks down there along the Gulf. And who's on the hook for this? The taxpayer.
Sure. And we haven't, as you well know, we haven't even begun to fully understand what was done to the Gulf. I forget the name of it. You'll probably know, and if you don't, I'm sure Stan does, but that dispersant that they use, which is highly toxic.
Oh, corrects it. It corrects it.
That's insane. And I think we're looking at years of damage to marine life. They're finding all kinds of damage to fish Now they're finding fish with rotten fins and missing tail fins and all kinds of stuff, and dying whales, dying dolphins. I tell you, I would not eat anything out of the Gulf of Mexico for the next several years because they've poisoned it and they've destroyed the fishing industry. And it's going to cost us billions and billions of dollars if we even still have a government as we know it 3 or 4 years from now.
Well, if we're all still around at that point, it could be very moot by then.
Yeah.
Who knows? But just the endangered turtles, that's another small thing. But they're showing up down there, and they had clams and oysters with oil. They were showing the oil into, when they opened the shells, it was embedded into their tissue.
Yep.
And some of they were actually in a restaurant, and they said, "What is this?" And they popped open the shell, and here it was all black inside. There are fishermen down there, Vincent. They said they won't even eat it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you like I said, you look at end times prophecy and all the things the Lord has told us are going to happen, and you look at that, you read the headlines, you look at that, you read the headlines, and pretty soon they start to blur. It's pretty difficult to distinguish a headline from what the Bible tells us is going to happen.
Have you noticed, I'm sure you must have, that I'm not, just tar and feathering President Obama, but have you noticed that since he came in office, it's like end times are on greased wheels. It is absolutely just spiraling downward.